love to put together something to help promote sharing, or wearing masks in Moscow. So really the concept was another partnership and collaborative effort that we put together with the city, the chamber, the University of Idaho, and the U of I. And so we all came together. This is just a little sneak peek of several different things that'll be going out by the end of the week. This is the Mask Moscow, help protect your friends and neighbors. And the whole idea is wear your mask to keep Moscow healthy, safe, and open. Knowing that we're going to continue to work through COVID-19 and doing something like this to make wearing a mask. We all know why we should wear a mask. The education piece is already out there in full force, but having that information to say we're all doing this together and we're wearing our masks together and staying ahead of COVID-19 as best we can. So we've got a little something going out in the utility billing newsletter, which should hit mailboxes around June 7th-ish. And then June 4th, we'll be kicking off social media and some other fun things with another opportunity to post these on some of the electronic billboards around town as well. So just the idea, like I said, wear a mask, wash your hands, keep your distance. We're working to safely reopen and to stay open is the idea. So wanted to thank Maureen as well. She joined us on that group to help get that taken care of and put together. And again, Appearances does wonderful work. And so we're just really thankful to have another partnership opportunity and promote masks, wearing masks in Moscow. Any questions? Anything else I can share with you?
Jen, I think it's such a terrific idea, especially when you go into like these grocery stores or restaurants. And I know Kathy and I've got 4 different kinds of masks, as well as Kathy. And so, but it's amazing to me, there's a lot of folks who still don't do that. So we just need to educate and help get folks there. But we do have a lot that are doing it as well. Questions for Jen, anybody out there from council? Maureen.
Jen, don't we also have a bigger poster that we were trying to get businesses to put in their windows?
We do. I'm glad you brought that up. So we do have a poster. It's got, I think there's it's an 8x8, so maybe 64 different masks, selfies on it. It's got a grid. So we'll be launching that on June 4th as well. I'll put copies in your boxes, and we have a great stack at the city to pick up, and then the chamber will have some as well. Gritman Medical Center's got a stack, and the U of I is working on a count to get them up in their facilities as well. So,
it wasn't there a request to have city council members try and get businesses to put them up?
We have a lot of posters, and any way we can get them out and about would be great. So if anybody's looking to do a walk around town, let me know. We can hook you up with some posters.
Very good. Sandra, and then I'll go to you, Brandy. Sandra, you got the floor.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to navigate. Jen,
okay.
If you want to put a handful of those in my box, I'm downtown a lot, wandering around taking pictures. I'd love to drop some off to folks. Give me a handful.
Thank you, will do.
Brandy.
I just wanted to also mention that Appearances, also in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce, donated their time to create other posters that are free to any businesses that want to post them. Some may have seen them. It says we're open for business, and then it just describes a few things that the business is put into place to keep their customers safe, and kind of asking the same for their customers to please follow some precautions to keep their employees safe. And those are available at the Chamber of Commerce, and I believe also at Allegra for any business that wants to put one of those up. So thanks to Appearances and the Chamber for getting that going too.
Good information. Thank you, Brandy. Any others want to talk? Okay, well, thank you, Jen, for that report on Mask to Moscow, and we'll keep plugging away on it. So with that, we're going to move to item number 2. The Water Reclamation and Reuse Facility Plan Study Task Order Agreement. We got Tyler Palmer with us this evening. Tyler, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the time. Council, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've got a new background. Just want to brag on that for a minute. If you haven't noticed, the new Y-scape area out in front of City Hall on the way out. If you haven't seen it, take a look. It got completed in one day, and it's beautiful.
Sweet.
So yeah, we've got the what's before you tonight is the facility plan study for the water reclamation and reuse facility. This is something that we discussed with the council at the last council meeting. This is a step toward coming into compliance with our NPDES permit for temperature. We were asked by the Department of Environmental Quality to document a path forward to coming into compliance with the temperature standard in the permit, as we discussed at the previous meeting. And so as we looked at that, we really wanted to take into account what would be a smart way for us to do that, taking into account all of the components that we have in a very complicated wastewater system, and making sure that we look at it with a real systems awareness and make sure that we don't make a choice that would preclude future choices, and that we also take a good global view of the facility and look at what might be coming down the road. So with that, our last facility plan had been completed in 1999. It was much in need of updating. So through some great work by our environmental services group, we coordinated with the Department of Environmental Quality to assure that they felt like that would be a significant step toward coming into compliance with temperature and charting out a path toward compliance with our temperature permit. And so what's before the council tonight, this is a task order. So generally we wouldn't bring these. This is something that usually the city supervisor will approve. But given the nature of this project and the scope of the project for the city, we wanted to bring it before the council just so that you're aware of what we're moving forward with. And so we solicited proposals. We have a proposal for $272,100. Of that, we've identified $100,000 in this year's budget that we will use to initiate the study. And then we have proposed in the FY21 budget, the remainder of the funds to complete the study. With this in place, after our discussion with the council at the previous meeting, Mayor Lambert sent a letter to the DEQ prior to the June 1st deadline for us indicating how we would be moving forward and charting that path to compliance. And we have verified with the Department of Environmental Quality that sufficed the requirement, and they were very happy with the progress that we're making on this. So really that's what we're bringing forward, is just making you aware of this task order that we're proposing. And so the proposed action is just to authorize the city supervisor to approve this as he does other task orders, so we can move this critical work forward and get a really good up-to-date plan for the water reclamation and reuse facility.
Thank you, Tyler. Questions for Tyler? Ann, is that your hand up? Okay, Ann just was adjusting something. Questions for Tyler? Well, Arthur.
I'll jump in and say that given the horrible complexity of the whole process and trying to look forward with our crystal ball, I think it behooves us to have assistance in putting this report together. It'll help us stay on the good side of the DEQ and the EPA and really facilitate the most efficient use of city resources into the future. So given that, I would move that we authorize the city supervisor to approve the task order to complete the facility plan study, including the proposed funding proposal.
Gina.
I would second that, but I'd like to add, Art, if I can, that that somehow you dumb it down and bring it to us regularly so that we can take part in it. Tyler, please.
We certainly will. We'll report back at regular intervals as we come along with this, because there will be a lot of very interesting components. I know most of the council has gone through the tour of that facility, and it's an intriguing facility. It's the largest single investment the city's made in infrastructure, and it's a real Yes.
Okay, Tyler, you were kind of in the middle of something when it just stopped. Did you get a chance to say everything you wanted to say?
That and about more than anybody ever wanted me to
Well,
say, Your Honor.
I seen you guys were having nice side conversations while we were on mute on this end of it. So, okay, well, here's what we've got. We've got a motion by Art and a second by Gina to authorize the city supervisor to approve the task order to complete the facility plan study, including the proposed funding proposal. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
and Ann.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tyler. With that,
Thank you
we'll
all.
move on to item number 3. This has been kind of an awaited thing for a number of people in our city, the 2020 pool season recommendation. We have Dwight Curtis with us this evening, as well as Karen Johnston. Dwight, you have the floor, sir.
All righty, thank you. And I hadn't done this part before, so bear with me as I try to add in my PowerPoint. Okay, can you guys see that?
Okay, I can't see anything, Dwight. I don't think it's on our screen.
Okay. Let's try that again. And it is not on my screen. All right. I had this great training with Bill, and it's not going the way the training went. Okay. Suggestions. My PowerPoint is running. I just hit share, right?
Share screen?
And it's not on the screen.
Zach, can you be of assistance to Dwight? Zach's going to rejoin the meeting here and help you out.
I believe it needs to be on your main screen if it's not already, Dwight.
Hang on. What did you say?
It needs to be on his main.
Dwight, call
screen.
extension 7200.
We had come to the conclusion that I needed to undo those screens because it was messing it up. So hold on one second and we'll be there. Okay, now. Back off that. There it is.
Okay,
Okay,
now
can
something's
you hear now?
happening. Okay, there we go, Dwight. You got it.
Okay. Okay. All right, are we good?
Yes.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so here's the fun stuff. We were literally making changes to this just prior to the council meeting. So this is a really dynamic, fluid deal here, and hopefully I got this straight for you. So I thought I'd start out with this slide. First slide, you can see generally what this place looks like on a nice summer day. Everybody's having fun and they're all over the place. And so as unpopular as my recommendation is, it was or is to cancel the 2020 pool season. And for the reasons that I stated in my memo, just so many uncertainties to ensure a safe aquatic center with this COVID-19 situation, sanitizing, social distancing, and we are a regional attraction, so you have a lot of imported contagion risks. We're starting out in the middle of the summer, so a lot of the employees that we would have had have already gotten other jobs. And also you have too many restrictions and you detract from the enjoyment of why you're even having this. So with that said, I'm going to move into kind of the plan B. I mean, I'm not blind to the fact that people want this pool open. And so I am going to show you what the plan is and see where it goes from there.
Dwight,
So,
this is Gary, are you advancing your PowerPoint?
yes.
I'm seeing just the title screen.
That's all of us just seeing that.
Dwight, next
Yes.
at the bottom right corner of your PowerPoint window, there's a plus, then there's a minus, and then there's an icon. Click the icon. It'll go to a full screen presentation.
Okay, hold on. It just won't let me go back out of it here. Hold on.
That one.
Yeah, I clicked on that one earlier.
Okay, well then Zach will have to figure it out.
If you call extension 7200, Zach can help you walk through it, Dwight.
Hey. I have 3 if you count the laptop. I have
Laura, you might want to mute him while we're waiting.
It'll be nice when we can get back into the chambers for our council meetings.
Yes, it will, Brandy. I'm with you.
Yes, it will.
Jen has his presentation and she could share her screen and follow along with his spiel.
That sounds like a good idea if that can be conveyed to Dwight.
Dwight, did you hear that?
Wait, did you hear Lori? Dwight, you're muted, but Jen can go scroll through your PowerPoint to match along with what you're saying if you would like.
Dwight, I just put a request on your computer asking for you to give me remote control. Or I'm going to stop. You know what? Never mind. I'm going to do that. Thank you, Jen.
Okay, everybody has the first slide again?
Yes.
Okay, second slide.
Okay, there's the second slide.
Okay, okay. Okay, everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I went down through these, the reasons why my recommendation for canceling the pool season. And so next slide.
Okay.
So we do understand that people really want this pool open. And so with that, we have a open pool plan and a couple of items of interest here. Let's see here, I gotta move that, there we go. So it's usually an 85-day season. This would make it a 57-day season opening on July 1st. That's basically a month less than what we typically have. If you notice the second bullet there, okay, well, we have Brandy to thank for this. She asked some questions today and I was going back through trying to answer them. And somehow through my Excel program, it did not capture our drop-in fees. And so there was a considerable amount of money that I didn't account for. And I do apologize for that. So instead of it being a close to a 50-50 on the deficit, it's really only about 31. And reminder, this is projection, but we added in the, it was $79,500. That's a lot of money of revenues that for drop-ins that were not in that original number that I gave you. I'll show you the updated chart and all that in a minute. Currently, we have the minimum number of lifeguards that we need. Many of them that we did have already left looking for their jobs, something more certain. But we believe that we still have enough to get us through this season that have already basically committed to waiting till July. So I already mentioned it's a regional attraction. So you have an imported contagion risk. And also really important here for everybody to understand is that the operations will need to remain flexible so we can evolve as the situation are changing even today. And so we come up with a plan and something isn't working or changes, we'll adjust to make it work. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the plan. Okay, opening on July 1st. And this is beyond stage 4. So as far as the overall numbers, we're good. We are not planning to have swim lessons. And this is because it requires things that we can't do as far as social distancing. One of the options that you can have with doing swim lessons, and that's where the instructor tells the parent what to do, and the parent is in the water with the child, and it just doesn't work very well, and we're just really uncomfortable with that. So at this time, we're looking at no swim lessons. Also, no pool rentals, except for the various swim teams that we typically have using our pool. We would still have those in the mornings and work out the schedules with them so that they could still use that. If we're open, there's no reason why they couldn't. Tube slides, right now we're looking at no tube slides. Primarily, we're talking about the larger one, and that has the inner tubes, and that creates all kinds of issues all by itself. The smaller one, we found out, because you don't have to have a tube with that one, we could probably actually open that, and it'd be one more amenity that people would enjoy. So you'd only have one slide going. Also, on the tubes, we typically have, as you saw in that cover picture, people on the tubes going through the lazy river, and we also have this big inflatable contraption they call a fun run. It goes in the deeper pool, people run across it, and all kinds of fun things on it. But that one, just for sanitation reasons, we figure we would not have as well. So go on to the next slide, please. So this one is, we'll adjust as we need to, but I think Karen has a pretty good plan. Regular cleaning of touch surfaces throughout the open period, and she's going to have designated teams, and that's their job, go around and sanitize. And as we see things that might be need a little more, we'll adjust so that they get those areas are captured. Also, we'll have a safety officer, so to speak, somebody that's designated to make sure these things are happening throughout the time period that we are open. Somebody just needs to watch out for that. Lifeguards need to do lifeguard stuff. Concession stand people need to do concession stand people. And the cleaners, even though I'm confident they will be doing their job, somebody that's watching the whole picture will have control of that and adjust as necessary and make sure that it's actually happening. Also, the current capacity limits. It's kind of crazy when you're looking at the numbers. It's really hard to wrap one's mind around it. But we have a capacity there of 900, and that's a lot of people. But going back through our records, the most we've ever had in the pool on a single day was in the 800s and 800 something, and that's for a whole day. The 900 is at any given time, right? So we don't break those numbers down by the hour. So I had to do a little bit of Kentucky windage with my math, did a bell curve on the times that we figure were the heaviest use, and came up with a figure that we could work with and feel relatively comfortable with. And on that kind of day, we figure you might have a period of time where you might have 500 people at that pool at one time. Now, as far as the area itself where you can spread out, set up your whatever you want to call it, your sunbathing, your picnicking, whatever, just the area, the concrete decking area and the grass area out in front of the concession stand, we could put over 600 people if you're looking at your 36 square feet. And so that's more than what we figure you'll have at any given time. Plus we have the rest of the facility. And if you look at, well, I guess you can't look, but on that opening slide, you could see where the lounge chairs have been moved all over the place around the back side. So we're comfortable anyway, that at the moment that we can still social just with the numbers that will be coming in without having to limit. When you start limiting the number of people that can go into the facility, then you bring on a whole new number of problems that have to be dealt with. And mostly it's for those that don't get to go in. And so at this time, we feel that we're good with that. Masking, we're going to require that when people are not in the water. And we added one more, I'll show that in a little bit, but as part of that, we actually got this one through Marine earlier, and that is a lot of parents will take their little children into the wading pool, into the zero depth pool, and they just stand there in ankle deep water while their kids play. And so if they're not going to actually get in the water and, you know, actually where they're dunking their heads and stuff, we're going to ask them to remain masked. Because they're typically out there socializing with other parents. So we thought that was important. Season passes, well, we're looking at still doing that. It's at a prorated value. One of the protocols, restrictions, cautions that the governor used was the number of transactions that you make, and cash involves a lot of transactions where a pass, little kids that come without their parents can still have their pass without having to carry a bunch of cash, and it's less money that we have to deal with on the spot. No change in the cost for the drop-in patrons. And let's see here. This has one of the things cut off. Can everybody see number 12?
Yes, it's on there, Dwight.
Okay, I can't see it.
It says a designated staffer will oversee safety operations when the facility is open.
Okay, I got it. So, yeah, and then it disappeared again.
So I'm guessing that would be one person would be overseeing the safety of the operation while the facility is open. So you'd have one person would be going around doing that, if I understand that correct.
Yes, that's the safety officer I mentioned earlier. It's not necessarily the same person because a lot of times we're doing shift work, so and 7 days a week. So next slide, please. Okay, so I added this, some of these slides because information was still flowing just right before the meeting. One of the options that we have is to not open the showers. The locker room would still be open, but not the showers. The showers themselves there's a considerable cleaning issue there. And so by not having the shower, people just need to understand, and it'll cost us more in chlorine to take care of that. But it's a sanitation thing, a sanitizing thing that it would be actually pretty beneficial not to have to deal with that at this time. Parents to wear masks when, I already talked about this one in the wading pool. Lap swim, I know there were a lot of emails that came in. The swim teams are really pushing to keep their areas open. I as well believe that that's very doable if we stay open. Swim teams, typically, I believe they were from 6 to 8 in that range in the mornings. I don't see any reason to change that or to eliminate it anyway. A lot of people would like the lap swims to expand. Well, during the mornings after the swim teams are done, then we typically would have swim lessons. Well, with that not happening, now we have time that we could go ahead and open that up for lap swimming. And I am looking at working it similar to what we're doing here at the HERC right now, where you could go 1 hour increments, blocks of time, probably two people per lane. And a lot of people don't realize it, but you can add two, possibly 3 lanes over in the other pool as well. So we could start handling a lot of people with that. And if we need to adjust, not enough people are making it worthwhile, we can cut that back. But it sounds like there's a lot of room there for people to do that. And it could be that maybe we expand the swim team option another hour as well. We also have built into the schedule that we already had lap times of various sorts. And so under the circumstances, I don't think we need to change those. So this would be an addition to. Possibly this was brought up. I don't know that we can get it, but we could certainly try. And that's if you go to some of these gyms, Anytime Fitness, I'll throw them a plug here. But if you working out, they have this self-help cleaning dispensers. You just pull a wipe off and you can wipe your equipment down prior to using it. And especially they want you to afterwards. So we have lounge chairs. And so if somebody wants to clean that before they would sit, they could do that. And if not, if we can't get that, and I have no idea what the cost would be at this moment, but we also have our teams that will be out doing the best that they can on the chairs. Already talked about the cash only. Well, this is actually, that's an option that we have where you just go cash only and no pool passes. But that does bring along its own problems. Also, that much cash, we would likely, and I don't have those numbers at the moment, but likely work on changing the fee structure so that these would be even dollar type of transactions, no $7.11 or something like that. And that eliminates the error factor considerably where people are trying to change or count change and things like that. I think finance would appreciate that. And I'm certain that whoever's doing our pool reports the next day would appreciate that. And it also, for parents, just having to carry all kinds of cash it's just not comfortable or fun at the pool. Already mentioned the open, just a smaller tube slide. And we could also throw in capacity limits if this turns out that I'm in error and we have situations where the numbers of people are just so overwhelming that we would have to go to a plan B and start capacity limits. And of course, if you have pool passes, that automatically gives you a problem. Because if you have a pool pass, you don't expect to be turned away. So I think that was the last on that slide. Next screen, please. Okay, so just so everybody can, sometimes it's easier to see this when you see it. So I have a little bit of a comparison. There's no change in the drop-ins from what we had passed in the budget. So you can see where the adults and child and seniors. Then you go down to the passes. And so a little bit of Kentucky windage on the math. We figured on a pool pass, what did it cost for an 85-day season per day? And then so just multiplied that number by the 57 days, just tried to make it easy. And so you can see that's how we came up with per day what it would cost. Multiply that by the 57 days and you came up with your prices for this year. And we did the same thing for the non-residents. So as you can see on the slide, we've got the revised, which would be the new prices, and the scheduled is what was in the brochure. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this was in your packets, except you'll see the second revenue is the drop-ins. That's what was dropped. and I do apologize again for that. So 31% is considerably better than I think we had 50 or 60% on, as I had projected before. So that's a lot easier to swallow. $85,000 is still a lot of money, but it's certainly better than $160,000. So next slide, please. Okay, and in conclusion of my presentation anyway, I'd just like to say that, you know, a water park it's different than a tank type pool. They are meant to be a social gathering environment, a place of fun. That's what people do there. Even if we have all these restrictions, it's the natural thing that happens at a facility like this. And it is my opinion that if the patrons are cooperative and go with the rules that we put in, and we'll educate as much as absolutely positive, try to keep this as a positive thing, not a negative. But I believe that we'll minimize the risks as much as reasonably possible under these circumstances, and at the same time, still allow an enjoyable experience for everybody. And next slide, please. And in your packets, pardon me, to accept my okay. To accept the staff recommendation of not to open the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center for the season, or the council to open that aquatic center, approve the opening on July 1st, utilizing the plan I described, and anything you want to add or subtract to that, and or take other action as deemed necessary. And of course, I'm here to answer any questions I possibly can for you.
Okay, Dwight, before we get to the council, once we get back to the council screen, question for you. This plan, if we open, that would include the concession stand being closed. Is that correct?
Mhm.
The
No,
concession
stand will be open.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we had a follow-up on there clear to it. So, okay, questions for Dwight out there. I see all the councils. Maureen.
Okay, so let me just say, Dwight, I appreciate the work you have. As you know, I'm pretty much of an advocate right now to find procedures which would allow us to have the park open, the pool open. And I think that while we got many requests from particular teams and groups to kind of segregate them out, I believe that we need to have the pool open for everyone. I also think that I'm not taking issue with any of your requirements. I just want to add a couple more. And one of my concerns is I'm less concerned about the area that is open and around the pool. My biggest concern is with respect to the restrooms or the changing rooms. And I think some of my thoughts are how to reduce the time that people spend in those dressing rooms or locker rooms. And one of those is to really encourage people like the U of I does. The U of I right now just opened their pool and they require people to come in ready to swim and leave in the same outfit. So I think that we should try and figure out ways to encourage people to come in so they're not changing their clothes in the locker rooms. I also think that it's really important to have people in masks. I'm a big mask supporter, but I think especially if people walk into the restroom facilities, they really need to have a mask on them. I also believe that it's critical. You and I have probably a disagreement on this, but the guards must wear masks whenever they are at the pool, whether they're on the stand or not the stand. And I actually spoke with 2 lifeguards currently. One was a former one, one's a current one, that said it is not a problem to pop a mask on and jump in the water. And they did not think that that would be a problem to wear that. I think our guards and our staff at the pool need to give an example of the importance of wearing masks. I also think that we should close down the water fountains at the pool. And lastly, I think one of the things that the university does on the regular basis of their pool is they have passes. So I can walk up and say, look for the pass that says Maureen Laughlin. And so instead of anybody exchanging money, the person behind the counter can have a little punch thing, and they can pull out the card, and I could buy a 10 swim pass, and they could just push it, and money doesn't have to be exchanged that way. It minimizes those in a box in alphabetical order. And I also encouraged, there's a new epidemiological study that just came out on the importance of encouraging safe practices and not shaming or judging people. And I think that is a whole way of giving examples and strongly encouraging people to cooperate, because everyone who sent, almost everybody, I think, that sent us an email today saying, do it, open the pool, say, we'll open to whatever you want us to do, we will cooperate. And I think Moscow has been very compliant, which is why I think we have so many few members. So with those additional procedures, I support opening the pool.
Okay, who else wants to talk? Gina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't know that this is necessarily for Dwight. I think it's for Mia and or Gary. I need some legal guidance here. So there is an unspoken enforcement here, or maybe it's not unspoken, maybe it's overt. My concern is that even the governor in all of these stages was nothing more than a suggestion of measures to be taken. Are we willing as a community to go a step further now and put someone in an enforcement role? Can we? Is that what our plan is? I mean, what do we do when somebody won't comply? I have so many questions around that I agree with Maureen. I think we should open it in July. The overwhelming response to our question was, please open it. But I'm very concerned about this enforcement. I don't want us to turn into some sort of a military moment here.
Okay, Gary, you have the floor.
Okay, I'll leave the legal enforcement to Mia. It's our facility. It belongs to the city of Moscow, and therefore it's subject to whatever rules council or staff make for it. If someone is not complying, then staff has the ability to essentially ask someone to leave, in essence, revoking their license to use the facility because they haven't followed the rules. At that point, you see it in grocery stores sometimes. Someone is acting out, the management will ask them to leave, and if they come back into the facility, then they're issued a trespass. So it has to do with their permission to be there, not enforcing a mask order or something like that. So with that, I defer to Mia on the other legal issues.
Mia, you with us out there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I mean, the enforcement issues. So right now we are in stage 3, and we know what the stage 3 order says. And we know what's guidelines and what's mandatory. If council chooses to open the pool beginning July 1, I anticipate we will be in stage 4, and the regulations will be different there. And I'm not sure what will be mandatory and what will be discretionary. The mandatory portion certainly can be enforced pursuant to the governor and the director of health and welfare's authority as detailed in the order. But I know that, we are taking the community policing, we're trying to educate, encourage people to comply. And like Gary said, we can place whatever rules and regulations we feel is appropriate for our own pool. Gina, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I felt this way about the tree commission or the tree rule too, the ones that are in the right of way. I'm very uncomfortable with individuals who aren't either completely trained as our police are or completely trained as you and Gary are, using their judgment, using their power, using their, I think it has a bad situation waiting to happen. I agree that we can ask them to leave and that sort of thing, but this is the pool. It's sad that it would come to that. So I just want you to, and maybe it's not now Dwight's answer, soothe my ruffled feathers, Dwight and or Karen. Tell me that this isn't going to get ugly. Thanks, Mia.
Dwight.
So I can't tell you that. I would hope, like I said, if patrons are cooperative, we have situations now, and if I could also add with that, all of the stuff we're talking about is in addition to the normal jobs that they have at the pool. So, for example, the swim diaper requirement brings a wrath with it, and some parents do not want to do that. And we've had to have the police escort somebody out. It got so out of hand, and it wasn't the diaper. It was the reaction and how far they took it. I was there. I mean, the staff hardly said a word, but sometimes things just get out of hand. But enough people want this pool open, and not everybody has a child that needs a swim diaper, but everybody is having to experience this whole COVID thing. So I'm hopeful that people will cooperate, and we're just really hopeful. A lot of finger crossing, but I don't think any of the staff are interested in having all these confrontations. So we'll educate and try to keep these things positive instead of a police state. There's no fun with that. So that's about the best I can tell you with this.
Okay.
I'll stop asking questions because I want my other counselor or the other counselors to be able, but if we don't answer it by the end, I'm going to have to come back.
Brandy, and then I'll come to you, Art.
With that topic, I mean, I would say, I think it's pretty clear that this is just different than it's ever been. People really want the pool open, and it's kind of a compromise. Like what Dwight has come up with, he's advising that we not open, but if we decide to open, here are the things that through his research and discussions has been determined that will make it safe to proceed. So I think that if that's what is decided, it just needs to be very clearly communicated that this is what needs to happen for it to remain open. And I agree with what Dwight said about we need to remain flexible. Things can change. Maybe we won't be in stage 4 when we're in stage 4, which I hope that's not the case. But even if we start on July 1st, if it becomes that people are not complying and it is battles every day, I think then it was a failed experiment, and unfortunately it would have to close. And I think that just needs to be made clear from the beginning that this is not going to be like usual. And if you don't like the restrictions, then maybe this isn't your year to go to the pool.
Okay, Brandy. Art, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to make a little bit of an extension. As Dwight pointed out, the pool is a regional attraction. We will getting in people from around the area, not just Moscow itself. And that raises the possibility of import of virus into our area. So this one is for Gary and or Mia, is should somebody contract the virus at the city facility, the pool, what is the legal exposure for the city?
Okay, Gary, and then or Mia, either one. Gary, you want to address that, and then we'll go to Mia?
Well, the legal exposure is as long as we have reasonable precautions in place and we're following the governor's guidelines, we're taking all reasonable hygiene and social distancing measures. I've not seen where there is any liability that would be extended to the city for that.
Mia, would you like to add into that, please?
I think Gary adequately addressed that question. I agree with Gary's analysis.
Okay, thank you. Dwight's got his hand up. I'll go you, Dwight.
If I could go back one, I just would like to point out that here at the HERC, where we have limitations, and I mean, everybody that comes in here that wants to play basketball, they want to play basketball. And the limitations that we have, or the restrictions, to my knowledge, we haven't had a single incident. People have been really cooperative, even the teenagers. I mean, it's actually been pretty impressive and surprising, to tell you that, my opinion. But so I'm still crossing my fingers we'll have that same cooperation at the pool.
To Brandy's point, people are so willing to get a chance to do something. I have faith in them that they're going to be following through because it's just too important for too many people. And so, I don't know. I've got confidence, kind of like what Brandy has on this. Hey, Sandra, how about you or Ann? Sandra, you want to go ahead, and then I'll come to you, Ann.
Mr. Mayor. Dwight, I have a couple things. The first thing I really want to ask you, when you said that, it is your recommendation to not open the pool, and I know that you listed things like sanitation and concerns. What kind of research did you do, around the region or just here in town to solidify that basis to not open up? That's my first question.
Okay, Dwight.
Well, I don't know that I would call it research. It's just with the requirements that we have and the ability to meet that, and with the understanding that if we have it wrong, what the consequences are, that is why I came to that conclusion. I fully understood then that there's an overwhelming desire to open up the pool. And we're Parks and Rec people. We want it open too. And this is what we do. It just breaks my heart to even make that recommendation. But at the same time, is it worth dying over? And, whether you believe this thing is real or whether it's really dangerous or not, I don't have the luxury of just having an opinion like that. I have to look at what we have going into the facility and what you guys and the city has charged me to be responsible for. And so there you go. I believe that it does have a risk, and that is still my opinion. But at the same time, I can live with the plan B of opening it as long as we can have these protocols in place.
Before I go to Brandy,
come back, Mr. Mayor.
Did you have another follow-up, you said?
I do, but I can wait also. I don't know protocol.
Well, I just want to go to Ann. Ann, we haven't heard from yet, and I know Gina had her hand up as well as Brandy. Ann, do you have some comments you want to make on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask, what gives us the impression that the pool is a regional attraction, other than the fact that we know it's an enjoyable location? What do we have numbers on that in terms of where people are coming from or have been in the past?
Good question, Dwight.
Well, if you look at the figures we have for non-resident, that tells you some of the picture. A lot of the non-residents could live just right on the outside of the city limits, but I think Walter Steed was still here as a council member, and he used to walk through the parking lot almost every day and count Washington and other out-of-state license plates. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're from far away, but it does mean that they're coming in from at least across the border. And so we have pool passes that we sell from Lewiston, Clarkston, Albion. I mean, they come from long ways away, and we like that. That's a good thing. But it only takes somebody to come in from a hot spot that's from out of our area to mess up what we have right now as low numbers or no numbers. And so that's why we call it a regional attraction.
I appreciate that. And I asked because I think if we're looking at numbers via county, there's a big difference between someone coming from, say, Potlatch than someone from Spokane. And so if we're considering it as a regional facility, I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I'll go to Brandy, and then I'll come to you, Gina.
Thank you. So in some of the information, as you mentioned too, we're getting new information all the time. I think it was really great just this morning to get some feedback from people from the U of I Swim Center and seeing how they're doing things, and that they have been researching along with their legal and CDC and all these things and have come up with all these protocols. I'm impressed by everything that you have come up with. I mean, it's clear that you are prepared to implement, as we all know, just about everything carries some risk right now with this. And I feel that what's most important is that there is a thought out, reasoned plan to minimize the risks as best as possible. And if you have that in place, then, I feel pretty comfortable moving ahead, and that you have something in place and it will be enforced. It will actually happen. So, I think about all these other things that are currently happening, these other environments in our community right now that in many ways are open and are running, and arguably present a greater risk than this, because either they're indoors in small spaces, or there's even some of our other parks and playgrounds. I mean, we've opened those and people, as far as we know, are complying pretty well, but there isn't the oversight that there will be at the pool. We know that the outdoor environment is the best right now. So with that in mind, I also agree that the locker rooms, the changing rooms, are to me the most concerning. And, I also wonder, maybe Maureen mentioned this, I'm not sure, but I like that closing the showers, but maybe even not having the opportunity to use the changing rooms at all. Just the restroom stalls, the rest are blocked off. And that's made clear that you have to prepare in a different way for this season. And so if we're really focusing on reducing the risk, that will be the one area to me, adding a little more to that would, boost that safety even one step farther, in addition to all the things that you're proposing. And I also wonder about the social distancing that you mentioned, that there's plenty of space for it. And I'm sure you have some ideas and you have plenty of time to work them out, but what will that look like? So it's visually obvious to people where they can be and where they can't be.
Okay, Dwight had a question. Dwight's going to answer, and then I'm going to come to you, Gina.
Okay. To address both of those. So take yourself back to the point where we said possibly you would have, let's just say 300 people at the pool, and you have no toilets to use. That's where the locker rooms are, where the toilets are. We have 2 changing rooms or 2 family rooms. So those would be open. So now you have 2 toilets for 300 people. It's not feasible. So we need those locker rooms open so that people can use the restrooms.
Is there any way, I just don't remember, my kids are older now, I haven't been in there in a while. Is there a way to have the locker rooms open, but the changing area blocked off? So just the restroom stalls are available? Not really.
It's one big room.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the showers are separate, but it's one room. Can't really do it.
Okay, I'm going to go to Gina.
Bill?
Yes.
Just had the second question there. You had a second question? Maybe.
It was about how to sort of enforce the distancing, maybe with providing some visuals or something.
Yes, and it's a good question. And I don't know that everybody's going to agree with what our plan is for this. But what we're saying is where people are painting or somehow or another putting boxes, some squares and stuff like that so people know where to go. One of the issues that we have here with that is that family groups, households, they don't have to do the social distancing. So you could have 10 people show up in one family and the boxes no longer mean anything. So what our approach is that you have to be 6 feet away from the next group. And so people, you can see it, well, you can't right now, but people want to separate out there. It's what they naturally do. You see them spread all over the place. And so that's why we believe that our numbers, the math that we did and physically went out and distanced this stuff will work. And it'll still take, no doubt, a lot of reminding and education as people come along, but we believe that that'll work. If it doesn't, we're prepared to go out and put the cones down and go that route. But it's just the fact that you have too many groups that come in that are all of the same household, and 36 square feet doesn't apply at that point. It only applies outside of where their group is. And so that's the approach that we're planning at the moment. So we're hoping that, are counting on, that the education that we'll do, and we'll have people out there talking to people as they're coming in. And so we're hoping that will work.
Okay, Gina.
Okay, I am feeling better about this. I'm hoping that you train your largest and most articulate staff members who will be able to explain these regulations, Dwight and Karen. My question, though, for you now, because you know me, what about the money situation? Is there a way that you can get away from actually having to handle money? Is there a way that I don't know. You know, you showed both sides. You said either move totally towards cash transactions or, you know, with the seasoned people, they have their low passes. What do you do? What's the ideal solution?
Okay, I guess that's you, Dwight.
Okay, so our recommendation is that we have pool passes, and there would also be some cash, especially when it comes to the concession stands. We have a charge that comes with every time you use a debit card. And so if you go out and buy $1 something, we're paying a lot of money and not getting anything in return. And so a lot of people use the debit cards when it comes to that, when they have the parents, but there's always some cash. And just, we have had deposits of up to $5,000 in one day. So if you're let's just say you put even half of that in just cash and small bills and change, it just becomes insane. We know that there's the issues with contaminant when you're talking change, but at the pool or at the concession stand, that's part of our plan. They'll be gloved. You know, we serve without those same dirty gloves and all of that stuff. And so I don't know how we can get away from it to some degree. Because even if people come over to the HERC and pay cash for stuff, we still have the same problem. It's just over here. And so we accept that that's part of this deal. We just want to minimize it. We think that the pool passes will help with that. It just won't eliminate it. So we'll just deal with it through this sanitizing.
Okay, Sandra. Yeah, and then I'll come to you, Maureen.
Dwight, a couple things. On the enforcement side, that sort of goes also with the money issue, because it seems like we have lifeguards, and I know we have concession staff, but now we have to have people that are truly going around and cleaning a lot. And I see it, especially if we're going to keep chairs outside. That's a lot of cleaning going on. And then enforcement staff. I mean, it seems like if you're talking about a possibility of 500 people at the pool, you're going to need more than just one person roaming around to make sure that people are doing everything they have to do. And they may need a little backup at times. So one question I have, and I have a couple. One is, what kind of extra money are we thinking about in terms of extra staff for these things, and also for supplies like the cleaning supplies? And then the second part of that, in terms of the masking, well, I'm a big fan of masks, and I try to wear mine everywhere, and I've handed them out to people in stores who weren't wearing them. I am really wondering about the heat of those July and August days wearing a mask at the pool, especially inside the pool, even if you're just with your kid ankle deep. So, and what's the restriction? Like, do I have to have it up to my neck or to wear a mask? Or if I'm waist deep, do I have to wear a mask or not wear a mask? Where's the level, even in that zero end part? I mean, if I'm just in that with a kid, do I have to wear them? What if I'm on my knees, or what if I'm playing with them? I think there are a lot of issues mask wise there that I'm concerned with, because they are hot and you can overheat pretty quickly. So a lot of these have to do with the enforcement and the safety issues, and then the money issue on paying for the extra help.
Dwight?
Okay, thank you. So we fully understand that it could be overwhelming for one person. We do have other staff. We just would have one in charge. So the cleaning staff, it'll be part of their job to be watching this stuff and educating as we go along. Also, and I apologize to Gary because we hadn't had a chance to talk about this yet. The staff, our management staff today, one of the things that we came up with was that, at least to start with, until this thing smooths out and we understand what's really happening, is that either myself, Karen, or Greg Morrison, one of the three of us will be there. I think we need an adult, and not to say we're so mature, but I think you need an adult there, somebody in management, even beyond our pool managers who are typically college students. But until we see what's actually happening and get a feel that we're comfortable with whatever our pool staff is that can handle it. And so there you go. And as far as the addition of staff members, Karen, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we're using the budget that we already have. There's some moving around of resources. So we plan to stay within the budget that we have. It's just moved around a little bit. Somebody asked me earlier today, this might have been Brandy, that, is this a matter of just counterbalancing when we move, because, for example, shutting down one of the slides, does that change? You still have the person, but can you move them around to other things? So that's what we're doing. If it changes and we need more, then, well, it does. So, but at this time, we think we're okay with that.
And how about that mask protocol in the pool? How are we going to establish what level in the pool do you have to wear a mask?
Well, we haven't actually put that part together yet, but a lot of common sense. We're basically talking about people that are just standing there. They're just, and I don't have a measurement if it's just to their ankles. If people go out and they sit in the water, which they do, well, they have a pretty good opportunity to get soaking wet. Things like that. This is one of those areas where, we would be asking them, and it would be the parents' determination whether they're going to actually get into the water. We're not trying to make something that's confrontational, just a little more safety protocols when they have no plan to get into the water. So we'll work that part out, but I don't have a specific answer for you. Sorry.
Okay, Maureen.
That's okay. Thank you.
In terms of, as Brandy said, and I said, and I think that Dwight has said, one of the major concerns is having people inside in close areas, which is the concern about the restrooms, which is part of the reason why it's particularly critical that people that are inside in the small spaces wear masks. And that's why if you're going into the bathroom, then they really, really have to have a mask on, because the mask will help some of the problems we have with social distancing with 3 or 4 stalls open in the bathroom. And also, Dwight, another thought was, in addition to punch cards that people can have, like buy 10 passes or something, you can also think about doing that in the concessions place. And it's kind of like just have dollar bills going around the outside. And if everything is in an even number, then someone could put down $20 for their kid. And then you just have a debit running. You look up the name that says Laughlin and you knock off $5. Just trying to figure out how to not have too much money.
Some of the logistics things, I think Dwight and his team can address it very well. We could nitpick this thing to death, council. So I would suggest that Dwight comes up with the things that we've been very much talking about. If that's the direction we're going and the council decides to pass this for the opening of what the staff's recommendation is, and then get something in writing from Dwight and or Karen about this is what we're going to do. This is kind of the protocol for it, because we could go on and make 200 items if we wanted to. And so I think we need to be calculated on it, but I think we need to be concise on it too, because by the time a guy got done reading all the rules, your swim time might be up. Gina, you had your hand up.
Well, you motivated me to make a motion.
Oh, okay.
So I move that we go ahead with opening the pool on July 1 with the, I don't want to say restrictions, with the restrictions that Dwight has mentioned about masking. And I do think, I think we need to add the requirement now, that I want us to be very, very, I'm preaching. I say we open the pool July 1 with Dwight's restrictions, period.
Maureen, is there a second out there? Maureen, your volume's off. Can't hear you.
Can we change your word, Gina, to safety protocols? And then I will adopt it. That was the word I think you're looking for.
I love protocols, safety protocols. Awesome.
So is that okay. So we've got a motion by Gina and a second by Maureen. And this is how I get this motion, everybody. To accept staff's recommendation on the opening of the pool plan July 1st as outlined by the safety protocol of staff. Does that sound reasonable? Does that sound good to the motion and the second? Okay, Brandy had something she wanted to say. I seen her hand up. Brandy?
So, yeah, I think we're set with the motion and the second. I just still had a couple other questions, and not to get nitpicky, but I am curious to hear from you, Dwight, about the decision about the concessions, why you're recommending if we open that the concessions are open.
Dwight?
So when you think about it, the concession area is one of the cleanest areas that we have already. And so people go to these facilities, it's hot, and they want concessions. And so we feel that we need to provide that. We might modify what we might normally prepare and serve. I'm not exactly sure what the whole menu is, but those items that are simple and worthwhile to purchase at that without getting too complicated with the, certain food items or something. And so that there's, and it's also a revenue source that is helpful as well. Not everybody brings a cooler with all their food. So they rely on that. If it's not open, they would probably start bringing their coolers with all their food. So.
Yep, that makes sense. And thinking about other food establishments are open, and very good. You're right. I mean, that's a place where you can really control cleanliness, and there's a whole other requirement from the health department and everything else. So, so great. And as far as, do you feel, would there be any certain point beyond which you would not, is too many people? I mean, do you want to have counts?
Well, we are going to have a counter, so we can have an idea what's going on at any given time in the pool. It's not something we've ever had to do before. The more the merrier is how it's always been. We've never met the max, and I don't think we want to, even on a great day, to be honest with you. But so we will do that and monitor it, and if it's becomes a mob and we can't control it, then we'll have to just start closing the gate, I guess, until, I don't have an exact answer for you, but we plan to monitor it so we can see what's actually happening. The numbers that we have don't tell the whole story. They show the whole day. They just don't talk about the individual hour. I've looked at a lot of different photographs of when that thing has been packed, and there's still a lot of room in there. It's amazing. One of the things we have as a capital project has been to move that fence that's between the HERC and the Aquatic Center and take advantage of that grass area so we had more room for people. And but when you actually go out and do the measurements, I still think it's a good idea, but it's not nearly as critical as I had originally thought. So yeah, we'll monitor it and we'll have to adjust if it turns into a mob.
So I think that all just goes back to what you said in the beginning about remaining flexible and just kind of seeing what happens and making changes if they're needed. And I think that's really important, being responsive to even if maybe a restriction that was there in the beginning, maybe if it's no longer needed in August, being willing to take that away. But then again, if it turns out that an additional restriction is needed, being able to add that. And as far as kind of moving forward, is there an opportunity? We've had a lot of different suggestions come up and ideas, and I know we were flooded with things, and you probably were too, Dwight, with a lot of very supportive and constructive suggestions. Will we have an opportunity for you to, as you continue to work through this and with Karen over the next month, to kind of see the final plan as it's going to be when the day comes that it opens? How does that work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, one of the things Karen will have for the season too is a way, survey, basically comment, so that people, when they're participating at the pool, if they want to make comment, good, bad, change, whatever, that we have constant feedback throughout the season. So definitely we'll work on that.
Well,
and the plan itself, we'll have that written out as specific as we can, and we'll make sure that's out. We don't want that to go out at pool day. I mean, we want the public to know well in advance so we can start educating.
Well, some of those questions that you asked, Brandy, goes right into what the motion was, and so I'm going to reread that motion after all this discussion. And that motion was to accept staff's recommendation on the opening for the pool plan July 1st as outlined by staff's safety protocol. So that safety protocol could change. Doesn't mean that's set in stone. So there may be things that lighten up. There may be other things that need to tighten up, or something else may need to be added to it. But I think that gives our pool folks enough flexibility to be able to manage that.
Yeah. I really appreciate that your plan B that you presented to us, Dwight, is a July 1st start, because we're going to know a lot more in a month from now. And so I appreciate that you are taking your time to get this all as right as possible. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to vote for this thing? Everybody understands the motion? I'll start to roll with Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra. I didn't hear you, Sandra.
It's a squishy I, but an I.
Okay, Maureen.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Ann.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move forward with it. We look forward to seeing your safety protocols come out, Dwight. Thank you very much, Dwight, for being versatile and being able to do that. There was a lot of conversation, and we got tons and tons of emails from folks, so it will make some people out there in Moscow very happy. So with that, thank you, Dwight, for your and Karen's work on this. Appreciate it. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to item number 4, consideration and resolution allowing temporary business extension into Main Street right-of-way. And Gary, before I get to you, I am going to call on Brandy.
Thank you, Mayor. As a business owner on Main Street that will be impacted by the council's decision tonight, I'm going to recuse myself from the deliberations and the voting on this topic. While I would love to be a part of it, believe me, I just do want to make a little statement that I appreciate all the efforts that have been made to reach out to businesses and to the Alcohol Beverage Control Agency to really try to implement things expediently to help our businesses. And I hope that whatever decision is made I think the most important thing is that it has flexibility built into it, just like I said about the pool, but things are just changing so rapidly. So if something works, that there's the ability to expand it. If the feedback from the businesses is it doesn't work, that we say, okay, well, that was worth a try. Let's try something else. So that's my blanket statement, and I will refrain from talking anymore during this agenda item.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandy. Brandy recuses herself from item number 4, and so I will go right to you, Gary.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll share my screen with you. Assuming
there we
you can
go.
all see that.
Yep, popped up quite nicely.
First time luck. Okay, the issue tonight we're talking about, there has been discussion within the council to try and help businesses who have had social distancing put upon them by both the governor's order and protocols. And is there a way to help these businesses in returning to profitability as the state and especially our town move forward in reopening? So the discussion that we've had at previous council meetings has been take a look at some of our policies downtown to determine if there are some things that the city can do to assist. So at the last meeting, council meeting, I indicated to the council that we were moving forward with reaching out to local businesses downtown. We had talked about expansion of some potential expansion of sidewalk cafes, and that before we could move forward with that, we needed to take the pulse of downtown businesses to determine if they had an interest in doing that. So we reached out to Jenny Ford, the executive director of the Moscow Chamber of Commerce, and just because of the short period of time she had to reach out, I believe I called her on Thursday, and she had several businesses return her call by Monday, but certainly not enough of a sample to determine whether or not it would be positively reacted by the downtown businesses. So on May 21st, Tyler Palmer, Amanda Argona, our community events manager, and Will Krassel of our police department held a remote call for downtown businesses, and they were a diverse number of businesses in different types of businesses, restaurants, bars, and offices, that sort of thing. 12 businesses responded and participated in the call, and Jenny Ford, the executive director of the chamber, was also there, as were 3 council members. Brandy was there as the owner of One World Cafe, and Sandra and Maureen were also present. At the end of that meeting, Tyler kept minutes of the proceedings, which were included in your packets. And the upshot of the meeting were there were 3 recommendations that were being considered or were thrown out at that meeting that we could move forward with, that council could take a look at whether or not they wanted to at least change policies. The first was leaving farmers market closure of Main Street in place after the market is finished each Saturday. The second, launching a pilot program for expansion of sidewalk cafes into certain parking areas. And 3, reviewing alcohol serving regulations for sidewalk cafes to determine if the state of Idaho would be willing to permit the city to allow temporary expansion of licensed areas. Regarding number 3, the issue is not that the state of Idaho would not allow expansion, but rather that it takes time to do that. And if it can be done at a local level, we can be fairly expedient in granting those. So you have a memo in your packet, a fairly extensive memo that we put together last week and talked about each of these alternatives. Looking at the leaving farmers market closure, or leaving the closure of Main Street with farmers market, was one that we considered, and I am not recommending that council move ahead with that for several reasons. That is, there was no specific program that was put forth as this would facilitate help to those businesses in social distancing, that it wasn't an overwhelming number of the folks at the May 21st meeting that were in favor of this sort of thing, that closure of the travel lanes of Main Street for essentially what would be early Saturday morning until Sunday evening, the utility to the businesses of being able to expand was not outweighed by the limitations or the inconvenience to the traveling public. Thirdly, one of the issues was, as Amanda Argona indicated at our last council meeting, some of the regulations that have changed for the modified farmers market are to the market, as you know, is going to be a perishable commodities type market, that there will be no prepared food vendors or craft vendors at the beginning of the market, which opens this Saturday, by the way. And the idea was, as antithetical as it seems, in past years, we have wanted more and more patrons, wanted them to hang around at the market, socialize, that sort of thing. This year, that is exactly the opposite of what we want to have happen at this time. We're in phase 3 or stage 3 of the protocol, governor's protocol. So up to 50 people can be accommodated. Gatherings of over 50 are strongly discouraged, and we aren't quite sure what will happen in stage 4. So obviously, in order to keep our numbers for farmers market, the patrons will have to come purchase their goods and move out so somebody else can come in and purchase their goods. Opening up the right-of-way or leaving it closed, if you will likely encourage folks to hang around more. You might be able to attain social distancing, but working at opposite ends of what we're trying to do in the market. So with that, if the council, my recommendation is if the council wants to move forward with a temporary closure of the Main Street right-of-way along the lines outlined in the memo, that can certainly be done later on in the summer when we have more time to figure out what that program might look like. But that is not the recommendation moving forward today because it's fairly expansive, and we believe that we can provide some relief to those businesses without having to take that step. So number 2, launching a pilot program for expansion of sidewalk cafes is the recommendation that we are making to council today. Prior to getting into the meat and potatoes of that recommendation, I would also note that, and Brandy alluded to this a little bit, staff did contact the governor's office in order to find out if the governor could grant some, permit local government to expand or grant expansion to licensed areas where sidewalk cafes can serve alcohol. The process now is that you have to go through the state. As I indicated, that's a process that takes some time. If we could do it locally, we could really be a lot more efficient and reactive to helping local business. We were pleased to hear that the governor's office returned a positive, and Mia contacted Bradley Doty, a captain of the Idaho State Police with the alcohol control folks, and indicated that within certain parameters, the state would allow the city to process expansions. They want some letter and what type of expansion, that sort of thing, what process we're using, but they did say that they would allow us to do that, which is a great step forward for us, and we're able to process things that much quicker. So as we get into launching the pilot program, Moscow City Code Title IX, Chapter 12 regulates sidewalk cafes, and it's fairly in-depth. There are several items in the sidewalk cafes that we believe that we could request be suspended so that some relief could be granted, and we'll go into those in a few moments. But the first has to do with what the configuration of those sidewalk cafes could look like. So I've got a couple of slides that illustrate that. This is a diagram that Tyler Palmer included in his memo. In this particular diagram, you can see that the Sidewalk Cafe, you've got the restaurant on the left side of the screen. Then you have what would be the normal Sidewalk Cafe, a part that goes out into the sidewalk right-of-way. And then after that, of course, you've got the public who can continue to use the sidewalk. Under our current regulations, 4 feet of the sidewalk must remain unobstructed for pedestrian passage. The sidewalks are not wide enough and clear enough that you can just move the pedestrians to the far outside away from the business passageway and still remain on the sidewalk itself. So this is one configuration that was looked at, and that is that you bifurcate as you allow the Sidewalk Cafe to expand. You keep an unobstructed 4-foot area for the public to traverse across the Sidewalk Cafe. This is a little bit more complex, especially in a situation where the restaurant is serving alcoholic beverages. We can do that, and it just makes it just a little more complex. So that is one configuration. And here are some, Tyler Palmer and Steve Schulte, our street storm manager, went out and laid out some pilot programs or some pilots to see what it could look like. We've got a couple of different views here. This is in front of La Casa Lopez and the Chamber of Commerce. As you can see, the Sidewalk Cafe has been expanded to the parking strip. However, the travel lanes of Main Street remain open. In this configuration, then, pedestrians would be able to traverse the Sidewalk Cafe via a 4-foot unobstructed pathway. This is what it looks like from another angle. Those barricades you see are the same barricades that the city used. They're owned by the city. You've seen them for several different celebrations, the Vandaltown Block Party, Art Walk, so on and so forth. So we would make those available to businesses to use as well. This is what it looks like from yet another angle. It's certainly not ideal. There are some uneven surfaces. You've got the ledge or exposure of the curb, but it is something that can be done. I would note as well that there was an article in the Spokesman Review this morning that also talked about in Spokane, they are making sidewalk cafes. They're also allowing reduced or suspension of certain rules to expedite businesses to be able to expand sidewalk cafes and increase opportunities for social distancing. So this is how that first configuration would look. This is a configuration I've stolen from the city of Boise. Actually, it was sent to us by Captain Doty as one of the diagrams or an example of a diagram that you could use for a sidewalk cafe expansion. As you can see, this is 8th Street. Those of you who are familiar with Boise and the restaurants that line that entertainment type district. What they're doing here is expanding the sidewalk cafe out from the front of the business and then moving traffic to the very edge of the right-of-way, stopping vehicular traffic altogether on 8th Street while bike lanes remain open. The configuration, this is a very nice configuration because it allows very distinct delineation of the expansion without having the public traverse down the middle of the sidewalk cafe. So that is yet another configuration. What you have before you here, this is an aerial shot of Main Street from 7th to the North Couplet. And you can see all of the eateries and drinking establishments in that area in the central business district. So there are opportunities to allow for these expansions. If you look at any of these here, it's really fairly nicely configured. Tyler and I have discussed this several times, that a lot of these restaurants are configured like here on the west side of Main Street from 6th through 4th. So still, there can still remain a bunch of parking. You would have intermittent cafes in front of each of these businesses, so on and so forth. So as you can see, there's a lot of opportunity to do something downtown. So the question is exactly what? So if we look at things that would have to be done in order to allow this to happen, we have drafted a resolution for council consideration that is in your packet. That resolution does a couple of different things. First of all, it goes through the salient sections of Moscow City Code, Title IX, Chapter 12, sidewalk cafe regulations, and looks at the elements of that code that would need to be suspended in order to allow some discretion in allowing expansion of these businesses. And these were looked at by Lori Hopkins, our city clerk, Mia Bautista, our city attorney, and myself. And we thought, okay, which elements are the ones that would need to be dealt with? So first of all, the licensed area itself. Okay, during Art Walk, I believe it was, or the Vandaltown Block Party, or both in the past, council allowed for an expansion of sidewalk cafes to go beyond the way the code reads now is that the eating and drinking establishment, the right-of-way that abuts it, is the limitation of the sidewalk cafe. So you can't go beyond the frontage footprint of your business. During that Art Walk and or Vandaltown Block Party, council by resolution allowed expansion of sidewalk cafes for restaurants in front of adjoining properties if the adjoining property owner granted the permission to do so. There are a couple of provisos there. One is you can't expand it across the ingress-egress of another property. But again, if the idea is to increase social distancing and your neighbor doesn't mind the expansion, that could be allowed by resolution. And that is included in your draft resolution. Secondly, the code requires that sidewalk cafe licenses be issued for a period of 1 year. In this case, we have an end date. We talked about this a little bit at the last council meeting, that sidewalk cafes typically start folding their tents, so to speak, toward the end of September, early October, coinciding with the weather turning breezy and cold and rainy. So we would like the ability, and it's within this resolution, to allow a license to be issued for that period of time, from the date the council were to authorize to up through October 4th, which is the first Sunday after the end of September. The code also calls for fees to be paid for a sidewalk cafe. In order to help the small businesses, at council's direction, we would propose, and this resolution proposes, that that could be waived as well. The expansion of the licensed area for alcohol service, which is section 12-4F4, is the reason that we talked to ABC and Captain Doty. So that appears not to be an issue. We would go through the same process that we go through in working in conjunction with the state, that we would have our police and fire, city clerk would look at it, determine if there are any safety issues, and if it appears that there are not, then she could issue an expansion for the alcohol service, an expansion of the service area. We also have a regulation in the code that does not allow for the service of liquor in a sidewalk cafe, except those sidewalk cafes operated by full-service restaurants that hold a liquor license. We've had a request from a bar owner that would like to have a sidewalk cafe as well, but is currently prohibited under the current code. So if the council so desires, and it's our recommendation that, again, if safety can be maintained, and of course, all of the rules for liquor licenses and beer and wine licenses remain in effect. We're only talking about expansion. I would also note that the prohibition of allowing liquor in a sidewalk cafe for non-full service restaurants is a City of Moscow regulation. That is not a regulation of the state. The state, it takes me into the next bullet point. The state also requires that there is a clear designation of the service area where a business can serve alcohol. The City of Moscow, the council, at the time that they authorized sidewalk cafes, indicated that they wanted sidewalk cafes to have a physical barrier for their alcohol service areas. That is something that, should the council want to, could grant under this resolution discretion to waive that requirement. I will comment that as we staffed this today pretty extensively, there are going to be areas where the physical barrier requirement would not be waived. Those would be areas where there are safety concerns, areas where, for instance, in the one configuration where you have the sidewalk going down through, where you are just able to expand the footprint of the sidewalk cafe, where you can easily have a barrier. We still have an open container prohibition in downtown Moscow, actually everywhere in Moscow on public rights of way. So it helps maintain that as well. However, that is something in the appropriate circumstance could be waived, or council could grant that authority to waive that. Then you have a limitation of the sidewalk area. The current regulation is that no more than 50% of the available sidewalk area can be utilized for a sidewalk cafe. Obviously, in both of the configurations that I showed earlier in my slide presentation, would take up more than 50%. Again, there will be areas that present different challenges. If you have a narrow street frontage, if you have a tree grate or a tree well right in front of your business, those may be areas that would take some amount of discretion. So again, we staffed it this morning, and all we could come up with is that we would have to have some sort of standards to exercise that discretion. And lastly, and this is not included in the draft resolution that you have before you, and that is a prohibition of sidewalk cafes in Friendship Square during farmers market. This is something that was done a long time ago in farmers market, was that the council wanted to make sure that farmers market had full access to Friendship Square. Friendship Square is where the speaker's wall is, which is, we call it the First Amendment wall, where folks can politic, they can spread the good word, whatever they want to do. It's a free speech wall. Randy Fife, our former city attorney, wrestled with this issue for several years and essentially indicated that in the exercise of free speech, the city can regulate reasonably the time, place, and manner of that speech. But at that time, he felt that promoting a private business over the citizens' right to free speech was not outweighed. However, I've gone back with the help of the city clerk and looked at the resolution that actually authorized that. And council, of course, could elect to change that resolution or suspend that resolution and move the speaker's wall elsewhere. Also, I've not heard from, I believe that farmers market is still determining in the case of social distancing, whether a suspension of the speaker's wall may be in the works as well. Amanda Argona has presented some information that we will continue to monitor on that. So we obviously have one, Bloom Cafe would like to be able to expand into Farmers Market. The north side of their business, they have licensed for a sidewalk cafe, except during the hours of Farmers Market. They would like it during Farmers Market as well. We've been approached by the owner of the Garden Lounge as well, George Scandalous, who has indicated he would like to expand into a sidewalk cafe on the south side of the Moscow Hotel property, which presents additional issues because the Garden Lounge is not a full service restaurant. So if the council wants to waive the liquor requirement and having a sidewalk cafe and farmers market, council can choose to do that. These are ideas that we've come up with. The resolution, as you can see, grants the city clerk, who issues licenses for sidewalk cafes, the discretion to look at applications coming in and grant temporary licenses within whatever authority the council wishes to give. The resolution has been drafted for council consideration, and we're looking for further direction.
Well, Gary, with all that being said, this resolution that you're bringing forward and asking for approval, the prohibition on the sidewalk cafes in Friendship Square, if I understood what you said, if we wanted to do away with that, we'd have to have a different resolution. Is that correct?
Actually, we could amend the resolution that's before you to add that additional, just identify the resolution.
That would have to be identified within the resolution, that last bullet point you had.
Yeah, it can all be done within this resolution, though, Your Honor.
Okay, let's go back to council so I can see who wants to weigh in on this first? We got everybody. Arthur.
Yeah, one question, a couple comments, but in the areas where there's diagonal parking in front of the restaurant or bar or other facility, is it possible to put in an additional space reserved just for safety zone? Because if you have your spaces set up in the parking area on Main Street where there's diagonal parking and somebody comes wheeling in with their Ford Excursion right next to the table, that doesn't sound too safe. So that might be something left to the discretion of our very common sense laden city staff to make sure that there is sufficient safety space around any tables that are set up in the diagonal parking areas, because that's one thing that's always bothered me a little bit. So yeah, Gary.
No, I'll call on you, Gary.
Yeah, we talked about that same thing, that certainly it would be nice. That was one of the advantages of closing down the Main Street right-of-way, is you would not have any vehicular traffic. But the way that we're setting up the application, which is still in the works, as I said, the city clerk has the authority to issue licenses or not issue licenses, but now we have an additional, we always have Public Works take a look at these as well, because it's expansion into the public right-of-way. So we can develop those protocols as we move forward. But Tyler and I have had those discussions already. Again, with the speed that council has wanted us to move this forward, we're still developing some of the protocols, but we talked about that very thing, Art.
Okay. Part two is just in the interest of common sense, having some flexibility relative to the physical barriers. I'm very much in favor of that, to be able to accommodate the existing benches along the street, tree wells, things like that. People have got common sense, so just allowing some flexibility in the regulations concerning the physical barriers, I think, is very appropriate. And also relative to the free speech area, I don't see a whole lot of free speaking going on at Farmers Market, at least in the initial phases, because if you're limited to 50 people at a time in Farmers Market, there's not much sense in setting anything up for this free speech area. In addition to which, the entirety of Friendship Square is now open and not used by anybody because there's no entertainment. So at least for the initial phases, I don't see a problem with the free speech wall just being left essentially adrift for later contemplation. And when the market does get back to full speed, perhaps moving the free speech area over to the far side of Friendship Square instead of on the west side. But in the interest of moving things along at a speed that would do businesses some good, I think we should move forward with resolution with very minor modification, as the mayor's pointed out, and proceed apace with direction to staff to complete the thing. Yeah.
Okay, who's next? Sandra.
Yeah, and to echo for sure exactly what Art said, especially about the free speech wall and about moving forward. I do, though, I think it's important to talk about the additions of, and I'm sorry I don't have the right wording, Gary, but I'd like to see the garden be able to expand, and I'd like to see Bloom be able to expand and use those spaces. So if there are modifications we have to need, and I'm very much in favor of making those modifications so people can eat and drink what and where they want within those guided areas. I think that enhances our downtown to a great extent. So I would like to see that incorporated in that recommendation.
Okay. Gina.
I echo what both Art and Sandra have said, barring one item, and I think it's probably just not enough time to think through it. I very much appreciate how quickly staff is responding to our demands. And I'm glad that we are all pulling together to support our businesses, but I am not completely in favor at this point of the garden expanding. I'm not sure that I'm ready to do that nuance or that change in the ordinance.
Okay. Well, Maureen, Maureen, I'll call on you. Then I'll come
Gary,
in.
this is a question for you, and that is whether or not the section, which I believe is Title 12, Section 6, subsection G, that goes on and it talks specifically about sidewalk cafes, whether that would cover the garden lounge's request. And so are they considered a sidewalk cafe, or would we need an additional amendment in order to allow them to do it if we were to allow it? Because I think if you suspended that section in your resolution, it would probably work for Bloom. My question is, would it work for the Garden Lounge?
The Garden Lounge has the ability right now, as would be John's Alley or anybody else, any other. The code talks about eating and or drinking establishments. The prohibition on hard liquor is separate in the code, as you picked up. The Garden Lounge or John's Alley or any of the other bar type drinking establishments could serve beer or wine in a sidewalk cafe. They're just prohibited from hard alcohol. So there is an opportunity to do that. Obviously, the question is, and I recall when the council initially passed this ordinance years ago, and at that time, there was a discussion of, okay, what does a full service restaurant mean? Does that mean you can sit in front of, the Mexican restaurant with a bowl of chips and drink margaritas all night? And that was the type of debate that went on. And council felt that they wanted to make sure that the full service restaurant was a requirement of drinking liquor in a sidewalk cafe. Again, there have been businesses asked for relief from that. It's hard, I think, to draw a distinction between drinking beer and wine and drinking hard drink. So again, council discretion. The previous council obviously thought it was important.
Okay, Ann, I'm going to call on you.
I don't have anything to add or any questions at this time. But
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Art.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that regardless of beer, wine, or hard liquor, which sometimes comes in a shot glass, but more frequently is mixed with some kind of vile sugary concoction, all the ABC rules still apply to them and their license to operate. So relative to the garden lounge, I don't have a problem with extending the same facility to operate into the public right-of-way that others might have.
Okay. Well, how would the council like to move forward here? All right, I see you got your glasses on, so I'll ask you.
Yeah, I think that upon a review of the memo, from what I've heard, everybody seems to be pretty much in accord. So I'd like to move that we approve the proposed resolution.
Okay, Gina.
Second.
Thomas, we need to make the proposed resolution with the amendments that Gary just spoke of.
Well, that's exactly correct if that's what the motioner wants to do. Art, does that sound good to you?
That's what I was hoping to accomplish. Thank you, Maureen.
Okay, and the seconder, Jeannie, you're good with that as well?
I am.
Okay, so what we've got here is to approve the proposed resolutions with the amendments that Gary had told us for the Friendship Square area. Sound good to everybody?
I do have one question on that.
Sandra?
Just a clarification more than anything. So does that include the expansion of eating and drinking, or does it still have to be restaurant only? I'm confused on like who you're talking about, the garden or John's Alley also being able to expand.
Gary, you want to add that?
Into Friendship Square, Sandra, is what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, in Friendship Square, Bloom actually, their footprint of their approved sidewalk cafe would allow alcohol to be served, beer and wine to be served, as well as food in an area around Bloom that, except for when Farmers Market is in session, on the north side of Bloom as well. The Garden Lounge could ask for a sidewalk cafe come in, again, for all of those times except when Farmers Market is in under the current ordinance, and could get a sidewalk cafe permit to serve beer and wine in a sidewalk cafe footprint. However, under the current ordinance, they would be prohibited from serving hard alcohol out there. Unless, and if the council is allowing that to be suspended pursuant to this resolution, then we would move ahead and the garden could come in and apply for a sidewalk cafe footprint and serve hard alcohol within that footprint.
So is that what you proposed, Art?
Yeah,
That is, yeah, that's exactly what I proposed, yes.
Thank you. I just needed
that
to make
was
sure it
Art's
was all set in my
motion.
head.
I seen him
appreciate it.
shaking his head, and I seen Gina shaking her head as well. So, okay, are we all good to go on this thing? Okay, I'll start the roll with Art.
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Maureen,
Right.
Gina,
Aye.
and Ann.
Aye.
Okay, we do have that resolution with that amendment, Gary, so we can move forward with that.
Okay.
Now we'll move on to item number 5, City COVID-19 Response Update from Gary.
Okay, thank you. And regarding the last item, we will finalize the resolution with that amendment, get that out to council, and gain your affirmation, and the mayor can then sign that and put that in place. Okay. With that, we are moving forward with the COVID-19 update. We are now in phase 3 of the governor's Rebounds Idaho, or Idaho Rebounds Plan. So we can allow gatherings up to 50 people as long as social distancing is being observed. We met with council leadership and the mayor last week and talked about some protocols moving forward in light of what we thought was the impending move to, I guess it was stage 3 of the governor's order. For instance, when will we start having in-person council meetings? When will committee meetings begin again, commission meetings? At that time, and I'm updating the memo to the council at this point, but it was felt by council leadership that we would begin in-person council meetings again on July 6th. However, we have started our first draft, our first reopening timeline indicated that we would try to move forward if all of the previous stages were successful to have our first council meeting on the 15th of June. The mayor and I have yet to staff that. We do have a public hearing on the Howard Street right-of-way vacation that was previously noted or noticed for the 15th. So as staff, we will review our protocols, make a recommendation to the mayor, and if in his discretion he feels that June 15th is a day for the first in-person council meeting, we'll have to take some, amend that somewhat. We will be working with IS because I would think that, and I guess I could pull the council right now, which of you would like to still participate remotely and which of you would attend an in-person council meeting at this point?
Are you only talking about June 15th?
June
There
15th
forward.
and until the council is wanting to come back into full session.
I will just answer that question for me, and that is, so long as you can assure social distancing of at least 6 feet between each council person, I would in fact come back.
Okay.
Ann,
I would prefer to participate remotely.
okay. Brandy,
Yeah, I probably should remote just since I work in healthcare. So I would love to come back there with everybody, but I probably would choose to do remote.
okay. Art,
I jump back in, no worries.
okay. Sandra,
I'm there.
Gina.
I may knock people over getting back to here.
Okay, so what we would have, Gary, is everybody except for Ann and Brandy. They would
Hey, you know,
be
I may
remote.
need to let me just think about it. Do I have to say it right now? No.
Well, if you decide to go remote, we can still do that, Maureen. You could have 3 of you remote and 3 of you here, and we can go along from there. So we can make those accommodations, I'm pretty sure, can't we, Gary? Should be no problem doing that.
IS seems to think we can do that. I will tell you, you remember how clunky our initial remote council meetings were when we had voiceovers and echoes and that sort of thing. So we will have to do IS will have to do some of their magic, but we'll see what we can do there.
Well, we're actually getting better at it. We were really clumsy at first because none of us knew what in the heck we were doing, but we've kind of come along over the last couple of months. And so, I think we're getting a little smoother, but it'd kind of be nice to have a few counselors in here. This council room is kind of lonely when I'm the only person here. I share that with you.
Okay, so committee meetings, we will reconvene after the 1st of July. So it would be, I believe, the 14th, if the time frame. Anyway, the second Monday in July would be the date.
13th, Gary.
13th?
Yep.
For our committee meetings. As far as citizen commission meetings, we talked a little bit about that last time. Transportation Commission will not be meeting until July. We don't have the staff available to be able to broadcast remotely commission meetings. So the direction from council leadership and the mayor was to hold those meetings beginning in August. So that would coincide with the same time as the Transportation Commission moving forward. Now, those are advisory commissions. If P&Z, Zoning Board of Adjustment, or Tree Commission is quasi-judicial capacity needs to meet, we will do that as necessary. We have all city buildings open. We're still restricting access to certain buildings, so people will wear masks while they're in here. We're going through a bunch more masks as people are starting to become more acclimated to coming back to their government. So we will continue to do that, see what happens going into phase 4. That should be a week from this Friday. We'll get the announcement on that. So we intend on keeping that protocol in place during that time. In the meantime, we continue Parks and Rec. They continue to look at their programs and moving forward. You dealt with a big one tonight. That was a big question mark. And now that we've got a direction going forward, that's great. So with that, hopefully, if we can have an in-person council meeting, at least with most of the council here, the legislative body, we'll get back to normal as quickly as possible. We are still wearing masks as a protocol for city staff. And again, you'll see some folks out, if they're working in a ditch or some of those, they won't be wearing masks if they can socially distance, but otherwise they're still the order of the day. Want to thank Maureen and everybody who worked on that Moscow Mask project. That's really kind of raised the awareness of people and really helping out. So with that, I certainly answer any questions.
Any questions for Gary? Brandy?
I just have one little thought when you were talking about the masks that the city is supplying, which is actually going back to the pool conversation when Dwight talked about possibly having the sanitizing wipes available for people. So just maybe connecting with him, because that would be one of the things that can qualify for reimbursement for the COVID related expenses. So I'm not sure that he's aware of that, but maybe just looking into that with him, I suppose.
Yeah, and quickly, if I may, Your Honor,
Sure.
we are managing the CARES Act reimbursement ability that the city has available to it. So anything like that, Brandy, all staff is segregating that out, submitting those to Elisa for reimbursement. We're still working on how time is going to be spent, staff time working directly on COVID-19.
Okay, other questions for Gary? Maureen?
So Gary, I'm just curious if there's a chance, if we have surplus money, one way to alleviate some of the tension at the pool may be if in fact in the booth, they actually have some masks for someone who doesn't have a mask.
And that's certainly something that can be done. I did talk to Elisa about that. There were some questions about, could the city provide masks to the public? And the answer is quite likely. We've got to look into it more. Certainly within a city facility, we have been doing that, and we can certainly continue to do that. So I'll bring that up with Dwight as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Gary, thank you for that report. That concludes the end of our meeting, but however, I'm going to need a motion to adjourn to executive session per Idaho Code 74-206 1C and F. And this meeting will not reconvene once that executive session is over. Do I have a motion by somebody?
So moved.
Maureen, second.
Yes.
Seconded.
Jean, okay. Motion by Maureen, a second by Art. All in favor? I'll start with Brandy.
Aye.
Art.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
And Ann. Okay, I'll see you all in a few minutes, Sam.